Hello and welcome to our international RealiTeas panel. Sipping RealiTeas with Shannon. I'm super excited to introduce to you Bence Bodnar from Hungary. We're very happy to have you here. Nakima Steffebauer from Brooklyn, all the way US. And then we have Mark Seronjoji from Denmark. Thank you for being here. That was a warm applause, and I thought it'll be so interesting to just give the whole conversation of what different realities look like in a place like Berlin. Also because, I mean, how many times do we walk through, I don't know where, Rosenthaler Platz, you name it, and we hear all sorts of languages, and we see that people come from all places in the world. Hence why I'm very excited to also, share and hear from you what your reality has been like since you came to Germany. So I'm just gonna ask with the regular annoying question. So, how long have you been in Berlin? Nakima.
I have been here since 6 years in July.
Right, okay, so it's gonna be an anniversary soon.
Yes.
Nice. And you moved from Brooklyn, you said, right?
I'm from Brooklyn.
Nice.
Old Brooklyn. Not
All Brooklyn.
hip Brooklyn, fly Brooklyn.
Nice. Nice.
Exactly.
All right. What about you, Mark? How long have you been in Berlin?
I've been here for 3 years now, a little over 3 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
So 3, 6, and Bence? Can you top that?
3.5. Yeah.
So you're in between.
Yeah.
And you moved all the way from Hungary?
Yeah, straight from Hungary. And like you asked about reality, and I was thinking about like how could I describe my reality back in Hungary, and how could I describe my reality in Germany, and or in Berlin. Germany and Berlin is different.
Because of course this is one of the things I want to hear from you guys, especially coming from an international context, and then you're in Berlin, you know. What drove you to come to this place? Which is not meant to be negative. I mean, let me do this again neutral. So, what drove you, or what was your motivation to come to Berlin, Mark?
Well, actually, I left Denmark about 5 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky enough to get a green card for the US. So I left and went to New York, and I was working there for a couple of years, but I was not landing the jobs that I wanted to do. I wanted to do digital marketing. And in the meantime, I was working in a museum space. I was working in a black museum space. So the experience was great because I got exposed to not only African American culture, but also kind of like the idea of the African diaspora in Brooklyn. And like coming from Denmark, that was the first time I was, in a majority space, and like working in an organization where everybody was black, everything was about the diaspora. But I wasn't landing the jobs that I wanted, and so that's when I started contemplating coming back to Europe, and I knew I didn't want to go back to Denmark. So I was just applying to big cities where I could see myself live and work, and I happened to get a job offer from Zalando, and that's what I went with. So I didn't choose Berlin, like it just came with the job.
I think that Zalando gets many of the internationals to the city. So let me just, continue with you, Bence.
Yeah, I spent 2 years in Zalando. But now I'm sober.
Exactly, I was just going the way you said it.
I left in August, and I feel so much better ever since. But before that, it's very fun, like Mark mentioned, like how, like coming from Denmark and arriving to this like very multicultural situation, like if I have to say like how living in Hungary was very homogenic. Like the society, like the population is 93% like white Caucasian. Like we have very minor like gypsy community, but it's very close, so there's not so much interaction with them.
Roma.
Yeah, so like arriving here was really like such an eye-opening situation. I just like taking the U8 or having like seriously, like U8 is by far my favorite line because it comes from like this like super white punko. It goes all the way to the coolest, deepest Neukölln.
You're actually giving me the idea to maybe have one of these settings in the U8 because we will have all the realities imaginable in one space.
Completely. So like arriving here is like simply the everyday conversations like what's your favorite movie turn into very sparkling cultural, religious-related conversations, and it really opened my eyes. Like every single time I just talked to a new person, it was like, your reality is so different than mine. Tell me more. I would like to get to know why you end up here and what are you doing here and how life treats you in Berlin.
What about you, Nakima? What was your pressing thing, your motivation or motor that drove you to Berlin from Brooklyn?
It wasn't, well, this is a long way from Brooklyn. Because I spent a lot of time in North Africa and the Middle East before getting to the place where I was in New York looking to move, because I married an Austrian, Vienna was out of the question, really wasn't into that. And I had a German friend that I knew from Beirut who was living in Kreuzberg. And so she invited us to visit Kreuzberg, and we did in '98, and we loved it. And we said, wow, you speak to people in German, they speak to you in German, they're kind of perplexed what you're doing here, but they're very nice. You speak to people in English, they'll try to speak to you in English. How cool is that? It's not like Vienna. So we
no hate against Vienna.
Just saying. So we really started to set our sights from that point on, well, what if we moved there? You know, that would be a good third-party neutral spot. You know, it would be really cool for me as an American to be in Europe. It would be really cool for my husband not to be in Austria. So, so we were planning, you know, I was already working in the tech industry, and I set my sights on, I think, Pixel Park, which was the only web-related company at the time, and applied there, and they were very eager, and I was very eager, and then they started asking for German translations of my Latin degrees from university, and I was like, yeah, they're not ready for this isn't going to work. So it took, in short, it took 2 tech booms, 2 tech busts, and eventually the time when 2011, 2012, that I was realizing, you know, I really just needed to live in Berlin because I'd always loved the city, visited a few times with my 2 kids, which I didn't have when I first visited. I still loved it. And I thought, okay, now there is a tech scene, now there is a community of people who are moving from all over the world. Let me try to make this happen. And so I did.
And you did make it, well, you made a lot of things happening because you created an NGO that teaches women from marginalized groups how to code. So
I did.
Yeah, kudos to that. We can, you know. This I find incredibly awesome, but what stands, well, at least in my mind, please correct me if that's wrong, to get to that point where you create a space like that, you maybe had your own learning, growing into, wait a minute, this is who I am, this is what I think is needed, and then let me go out there and create it. How would you describe that moment where that happened for you?
I think for me the thing is that throughout my professional career in the US, you know, there are many, many dividing factors, but race is the main and the most consistent pressure and obstacle that needs to be overcome. Coming to Berlin as a tech professional, senior software manager, I was shocked by the fact that I heard, reflected by lots of other nationalities, oh, here I can be just my nationality. You know, here I get to be an American, as opposed to a Black American, which I'm always going to be in the US. Doesn't matter how many languages I speak or where I've been, you're going to be Black first and then whatever else second. Whereas that was not the case when I got to Berlin, so I thought, okay, this is another reason to look around, see what's the difference between, you know, why is it such a positive experience for me to be working in the tech scene, which is, of course, has its own issues. And one of the things I saw is there's almost no women. It's incredibly sexist. Lots of the things that I had not heard so much when I was working in the US or in Canada, I was hearing more and more, and they were just such incredibly backwards and ancient and incredibly indefensible statements about how, you know, the absence of women needed to be justified. So if there are no women in the tech team, it's because they can't do tech, they don't know better, they're not interested, they're not good at it, and. And I was kind of like, wait a
not
minute,
really.
the same, right? So, you know, I started to join some of the groups that were teaching coding, because there are plenty in Berlin, and I was noticing that among the things that almost all of these groups had in common was that it was always guys who were doing the teaching. And I felt like, despite the good intention and despite, in many cases, the good atmosphere, a lot of what was being reinforced was this idea that, you know, you're learning a technical subject which some guy is going to confirm whether you've learned or not. And everything is being kind of checked and encouraged by men. So I thought, well, that doesn't seem difficult to fix if you're connected, which I was at the time, with lots of women who are working in the field and who themselves are able and interested in mentoring and developing the next generation of technical professionals.
Nice, that sounds very hands-on. Actually, I'm sure it was a long process. Mark, how would you describe your understanding or your feeling of your development, or how would you maybe in retrospect describe it, especially moving from Denmark then to the US, where, you know, the reality of being a black man is also very different, and then coming back to Berlin. How do you feel, has that helped or?
Yeah, I think, as I
self-development?
mentioned, like going from Denmark and then being in a very, not just in New York in itself, but then also working specifically in a black space. Taking the job in Berlin, I was very aware of what I was leaving behind, like what I was saying goodbye to by leaving New York. But I also felt that I actually gained a lot in terms of like self-development.
For example?
I became very aware of a lot of the racist structures that exist in Europe. And I mean, I was always aware of them, but I didn't fully understand until I had some distance to reflect on my environment, my upbringing, friends, things that were said like in casual jokes or comments that I went along with because that's just the way it is. And I was able to kind of like reflect back on how that affected me and also kind of like grieve retrospectively, be mad retrospectively. So when I came back, it was really with the sense of I want to be myself fully, and also meaning also to say no and stand up to whatever racist structure that I meet, or like even in passing when people make jokes, tell people no, that is not funny. I don't want to be addressed like that. So that was like, those are very small things that I was very aware of that I just needed to do going back to a very white corporate world.
How do you feel that Berlin has supported you in that? Like, was it you that then came to a point that, okay, this is it, this is the learning that I had to do, or were the impulses from Berlin that led you to being more aware in that sense?
I think part of it was me. I mean, when I got here, I was just like, I need to find black people ASAP.
We're here.
Yes. I mean, it was as basic as like getting into the apartment that I rented, putting out my laptop, Googling hip hop parties in Berlin. Where you at? What are we doing? And then I went to my first hip hop party, and I met a friend of mine who's still a friend now. I saw him as like, you're black, like, hey, how are you? What are you doing? Where do you hang out? And he took me then to we connected. He invited me to a talk event called at that point Black in Berlin by Jessica Taylor. It was once a month, and I would go there, and it was really great, kind of feeling like that sense of like going to church. It's like you live your life, you live your everyday work routine, hanging out with coworkers, but then that once a month you could like go and just like be black. And that was a great space, and that was then when I thought like, you know, we go to it and then we leave, and then you became maybe connected with some people, Facebook friends, got some phone numbers, but then it got me thinking, but where are we in the meantime? Like, what do you do the other like 29 days of the month? Like, where do you hang out? Where do you go? What's happening? And that's when I realized I want to be more active in either finding or creating spaces where I can connect with other black people in Europe. And I think also growing up and being very influenced by American media, then going to New York And then coming back, I was also aware that I wanted to create something that was, you know, European at its core as well, and not just, you know, always looking to America for the inspiration or the influence. Like what is Black European identity? Obviously, I'm not German, so it was more in the broader sense, like who are we here, and how do we talk about it in a European context? Yeah.
Bence, you were referring to the fact that Hungary is a very homogenic environment.
Yep.
And I remember also having conversations, especially also with you, since entering this space, as in Berlin, it's very diverse. And what it also did to me is just made me very aware of the nuances, the differences, and then learning about other people's realities, learning new vocabulary. So how did you feel? Because I hear that it can be very overwhelming as well from a perspective that is mainly white and male and straight, to then come into a space like, oh, what am I allowed to say? What does it mean to me?
Yeah, well, yeah, like when I said like Hungary is 93% like homogenic and like white, my reality was still quite fairly diverse compared to the average Hungarians. I had a Brazilian classmate as an exchange student when I was in high school. That was the reason. He was the reason why I started like learning English, in order to interact with this person who came from a very different culture. I was working with a Spanish-speaking guy for 4 years in advertising when I was working there. And then I had like a Brazilian, like art director partner who was half Black. So like I had like a very international group of friends. So arriving here was just getting this in bigger dose. Like while I was hanging with these friends like twice a week, I was hanging with similar type of people, similar type of background every day, which also I had like this transition period. But I love it. I like simply like what the negative or like the con part of this is that like going back to Hungary, I feel very disconnected from my people because it's just simply the conversations are not as exciting because we just still talk about the same
things.
What do you watch on Netflix, or you know?
Yeah. Also, we had this conversation about how recently, well, fairly recently, you also discovered, how can I put it, meditation, for example, for yourself. How did that happen? Was this also something that had to do with Berlin, that you needed to find, you know, a space within yourself, within this very dynamic place?
Yeah, well, like, you know, everybody says, like, when you get to, like, hey, in Berlin, you can be whoever you want to be. But this is a very overwhelming statement. Like, who should I be? Like, I can be so many things. So
Every day you can be someone
Yes, like,
else.
literally, like, you can be, you know, you can go to church in the morning, and you can go to Berkeley in the evening. It's like both happening on Sunday, so, you know, you can do this. So you just have to change, like, from white shirt to black, and you know. So, like, it was like a very, okay, I can be anyone, so who should I be? And I decided to become who I am.
I'm curious, who did you want to be when you came to Berlin?
I actually had no idea. Like, I just like, yeah, I had this idea of like, I only had career-driven goals. Like, you know, becoming a creative director before I turned 30, and, you know.
And what was that impulse that made you really actively think about, okay, but who do I want to be? Because we can also just move around about Berlin for, I don't know, 2 to 5 years, and then you're like, oh, let me...
Well, the first like kind of slap was when I lost the job that made me move here, which on paper looked like a dream job. I was like working for this global agency network. My first project was a Sony Bravia TV campaign, which is like, I don't know if you guys remember the famous like Sony Bravia TV ad when the bouncy balls like coming down in San Francisco. Like that was a quite iconic ad. It was like, okay, no one remembers, fine. You guys are too young, don't watch TV no more.
Yes.
So I just like, the thing is like, this is one of the top 20 ads in the world, in the history of advertising. And just like, okay, do something better than this. So I was like, okay, no pressure. It's fine, it's gonna be cool. And it was a lot of pressure. And I was just like, okay, I literally can't sleep. I'm working 12, 14 hours, so how can I still find time for myself in a day, but I can kind of like cool myself down and like kind of recenter. So meditation just came to my life like 2 years ago when I lost this job. I went to Tokyo and I spent 12 days in that like 40 million city by myself. And I just like, okay, so who I am, and like going that far from my reality And coming back, I was like, okay, I know what I want to be. And I actually had this goal of like becoming my own best friend. Because I think once you become your own best friend, meaning you are able to accept yourself the way you are, the way, you know, with your physical flaws or like mental flaws, you can become other people's best friend. And like going on this journey of acceptance or being able to live with who I am and what I am and how I look like or how I feel like or actually feeling in general is a journey that I really enjoy like pursuing, going on. So this is what meditation really helps me, of like resting in awareness, as they say.
Nice. I want to ask you too, because you mentioned how you needed to move away, go away, spend time on your own. And sometimes I feel in Berlin, or I hear that many people feel lonely, even though there are so many people. How did,
But you need your people. I think that's the difference. And I mean, you asked what was the impetus for moving to Berlin and what did you want to become? I think it was very clear for me from the time I started to think about moving here that I wanted to be an international woman of mystery. You know, I wanted to be a business woman doing deals, talking different languages, being in multiple countries, and that was always my goal. And it wasn't until, you know, a few years back when I was in a routine, getting off of planes, commuting to different parts of Germany and Poland, and you know, essentially doing the things that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have thought, wow, I would give anything to be able to, that I realized I don't see people who relate to me. I don't see change happening in my industry. I don't understand what it's gonna take for, you know, rooms full of older white men or younger white men to become kind of uncool, but it's not happening fast enough for me. And I don't feel like it's enough to just do well on my own. I feel like I want to see the diversity that I moved to this city for in my work life and in my my reality. So that's what, you know, pushed me to start Frauenloop and to start to be more attuned to where's the diversity on the street when you go into businesses, when you go into tech companies, when you go into anywhere that people are making money and representing this city.
You said that you came to Berlin way earlier, I think it was 98, and now you have two really cool children. You do. And so yourself in the way has changed as the roles have extended. And how do you feel, does the city just support you in being the mom, the professional, the Nakima, the mysterious businesswoman?
This is the best city in the world, I think, to be a go-getter and to be dynamic. It's one of those places that, you know, people always talk about New York, but, you know, when I came to this city and I settled in and I worked from the day after I arrived, basically, and I started looking around after a few months, and my whole social circle was moms, because my kids were in school, and so I didn't have any time to socialize after work, so I would socialize with the moms.
In Prenzlauer Berg.
In Prenzlauer Berg. And so that was not hot, and I just realized this is not going to do, you know, because I'll go crazy if I have to only interact with, you know, for the most part, women who had given up work entirely, for the most part, women who were completely out of the tech loop, cycle, everything, and try to bridge the cultural gaps, the experience gaps, the professional. I was like, this isn't going to work. So I started looking for hip hop, and I realized, you know, there's for some reason there's no hip hop dance group. Well, let me start one. So I started one, and that's how I think I kind of started, you know. And so every week I was at Theaterhaus Mitte, meeting people who were interested in hip hop dance, and we were dancing, and it was like, I think 30 nationalities that I met through that alone. But this is that kind of city. And I always say, I mean, there's so much of a diaspora community for everybody that I think it's crazy when you see these kind of incredibly whitewashed environments, and everyone's like, well, we don't know where all the diversity is, because I mean, it's right here.
It's right here in this room. As I look around, very diverse. Mark, how would you say, what's your experience or what's your take in regards to, because sometimes I also feel that the international, let's say, bubble can be not misleading, but just not really as representative of the whole of the Berlin experience. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I think you're right, but I mean, personally, I don't need it to be. I mean, I think I'm more concerned in creating a life and a circle that is for me, that I want. I mean, it's more of like stepping away of what society tells you that life has to be, or that you as a Black person in Europe, you're just destined to be the token one. Like you can only be 1 out of 10, you know? And I'm like, no, like F that, I will create my own reality. And if I want all my friends to be Black or of color, there will be that. And so I think that I'm very aware that I live in a bubble, but it's also slightly very, like it's a curated bubble. Like I created that world because that's what I need personally. And now I also love Berlin is also helping me create that professional environment where I can bring more of that to work as well. Going from doing marketing on the product side to now doing employer branding, I can focus more on like having the conversation of, okay, we want to attract all great candidates. Can we have a conversation of how we make sure that every great candidate is, you know, is being seen, but also feels that they hear themselves in the messaging that we are projecting. So like, how do we actually practice inclusivity also when we are doing our corporate marketing and trying to reach out to candidates? And then when they are interested in us, are we also then treating them fairly and making sure that they you know, truly represent themselves in the recruitment process? So I mean, I just started doing this last July, so I mean, still in the beginning phases, but these is the conversations that I'm starting to have in my work, and I'm really grateful for that because now I'm actually at a place where I feel that I can be myself the most in my work, and that I can actually not just like leave work and then complain to friends, but actually also find a way to like package these questions, these comments, and then bring them to the table and be paid for it.
Good point. Especially in Berlin, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to get paid for what you're worth.
Right.
But what I'd like to, before we start or open up the Q&A, since time is running, I would like to hear from each of you. What would be the thing that you would tell a person that maybe feels lost? Because I also hear that a lot in Berlin, that people feel lost or they seem lost in the overwhelming things that can happen. As you said, church, Berghain, what do I do? White shirt, black shirt.
I would say do sports. Like for me, basketball gave literally every friend that I have in Berlin, it came from basketball.
Yeah, me too.
Like, this is how I met you. This is how I met Elias sitting there. This is how I met. Like, you know, it's just simply like for me, finding an activity that just creates this community feel is the key to not to feel, because like, you know, there are all these like climbing rooms and stuff. You can just go there. You cannot not talk to people, and it's just like you do something, but you don't have to talk, but you can talk if you want. And then next night, let's go grab a beer afterwards, and then you're friends.
Yeah, good call. So do sports.
Yeah, like go to communities.
Yeah.
Nakima, what would be your thing you would tell a lost soul in Berlin?
I think my experience has been that when I haven't found connection, I've just created communities. That's what works for me.
So you're very proactive about it.
Because if there's a lack and a gap, then I assume that others must most probably have the same feeling and would be interested in what I'm interested in. I think also any activity, whether it's sports or, you know, anything organized where you feel wohl, you know, is going to be
Comfy.
an activity where you're going to be at your best, and that's how you meet people and you network with people.
Yeah.
You know, I think most successfully.
Nice. Mark, what's your advice to a lost soul in Berlin?
I mean, my first reaction would be like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, if you're lost, like, figure it out.
Google hip hop.
I mean, it's a little bit like I don't know what to say. Like, you can't help someone find themselves. Like they have to figure it out when they figure it out. But I think my only advice would be to, try to go for what makes you feel good, and not in the sense of escapism in like drugs or alcohol or a lot of anonymous sex, but more in terms of things that really make you feel good, like connections that make you feel good, activities that make you feel good, whether it's sports, whether it's connecting with other people. If you're missing something, maybe it's because it takes you to create it. So it's really like practicing, keep going for that thing that feels good, and then hopefully over time that will just be automatic, and then everything feels good, and you found yourself.
So that also takes ownership, right? Ownership in every person's life to be that person, right? To create the communities and to then connect on the levels where you feel.
A little bit what you said earlier, like one of you said, that Berlin is really a place that I feel you can be whoever you want to be. Like it's great if you are a go-getter. Like so it's really up to you to figure out what do you want to make of this. Like you can party 7 days a week. You can be chill. There's so much to do in the city, though, and so many people. Though most streets are also very calm, so you can pull yourself back. You can be at the forefront. You can sit in the front row. You can sit in the back. It's like, where do you want to be? What do you want to do? Yeah, because you can pretty much do it.
Yeah, but I think that Kima pointed out very smart. Like you should do it. You should do it on the field that you feel comfortable with doing. Like for me, like having played basketball for 20 years now, it was like whatever I'm gonna play at, there won't be no like feeling of I'm
that's your comfort zone.
Exactly. So stay within your comfort zone first, and then you can expand this comfort zone. And if your superpower is creating communities, then do that. Or if not, then you just like go and sit in a corner and read a book at a bar, and somebody's gonna come and talk to you. Yeah.
Okay, so at this point I would like to also connect to the rest of the room and just look around and get an idea of other questions, comments that you'd like to pose at this point, or just a remark is also welcome at this point. Feel free to do so. It's okay, I'll wait. All right, that's also fine. We still have. Oh wow. Okay, right. We're moving on, and I'd really want to say thank you to the three of you. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Nakima. Thank you, Bense. I had a lovely time, and want to give you a round of applause. So before we close off, there are some things that I want to say. And first of all, so this is the very first episode of Sipping Realities with Shannon in this beautiful space. Thank you, big thank you to this venue, the Loft am Salzufer, which is beautiful in my opinion. Thank you so much to the catering. The food looks lovely. I haven't had a chance to have any, but I will. Please give a hand of applause to Steve in this awesome pink. I know Liane hates it, but we're still gonna clap for her and the food that she organized. And then you guys, you don't understand how thankful I am for the team that has pulled up, showed up, supported me with 2000%. It's really, I'm trying not to cry. It's really extremely important, and I appreciate it so much that you all gave in all that time to support me in my vision, in my brainchild that I have the chance to share with you. And I'm really looking forward to the feedback that you're giving to me all. But before all of that, please let's give us a round of applause for my amazing team. Philip, Leah, Miriam, Ali, Adelina, Misha, Stevenson. Just to be clear, it's not Andre 3000's little brother. It's Stevenson, right? The original Stevenson. And I almost forgot. I need to walk you through your little coaching tool. Who still has that little paper? Nobody? Okay. Okay, so for the English speakers, of course I want to also give you something, to just ponder on when you get home, when you feel inspired, when you just want to take a break. And the conversation we were having today is, how to do you in Berlin. So when you go home and you take a minute to just look at the sheet, how it works is there's the scale from 0 to 10. 0 is the least and 10 the bestest. I'd like for you to think about, what does your 10 look like? What does your 10 look like in regards to your personal development? Because oftentimes we just want to do better or be different or change, but we never really define or barely define what that means and how we know that we've changed or that we've done better. We haven't set a mark or a frame for it. So I'm inviting you to set that frame for yourself, but not to see it as a static frame, rather than just something you're orienting yourself towards too, because I believe that goals are dynamic, they can change. But it's just, nice to have a direction. So look at what your personal 10 in regards to your personal development is, how to do you at 10, and then ask yourself, on that scale from 0 to 10, where am I? Where am I right now? Like realistically. Not from your ideal self point of view, but just really from your realistic and humble and honest and authentic point of view. Where am I at this very moment on this scale? And the next thing is, what helped me? What characteristic about myself? What resources? What skills have helped me to be at that point where I feel at the moment? Most of the times you don't start at 0, right? So just pinpoint all of these bullet points that helped you, because it's also important to not just look at, I haven't lost that many kg, or I don't have that job yet, but what do you have? What other resources, the skills, the characteristics you have that support you in your own journey, right? Like, what helped you? And then the next step is to look at, what does the next step actually look like? If you're at a 5, what does the 6 look like? Really write that down. And of course you need to know, what is that one thing you need to do in order to get to the next step, to the 6. And then all the way up to the 10. Enjoy, and I'm really curious to hear your feedback on what that piece of, work looks like for you. If you want to share, you're very welcome to do so. And on that note, I just want to say that if you want to support us, if you want to collaborate with us, if you want to support us, feel free to do so. There's this little box at the exit. When you leave this place and you had a beautiful experience, and maybe you feel inspired, had interesting impulses, then we're very happy, first of all, to hear that. More than that, of course, to pull off something lovely as this is, and to create this space. I believe it takes a village, and I strongly believe that every participant of the village, it doesn't matter of how much you are able to support and in which way, all of it is very, very valuable and very welcome. And that's why we didn't want to charge you and just really leave it up to you, because we want everyone with their reality in the room. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you so much for showing up. I really, really appreciate you. Thank you.